I'm not here today to try the case. We're not here today either to have a stand your ground or self-defense hearing. I welcome that because, quite frankly, that would require the defendant to take the stand and explain. All that evidence that the court heard in terms of defendant's statements, that's not admissible unless the state introduces it. He's got to testify, and then he would be subject to cross-examination, which is the key part about self-defense. That is, the person who claims it actually has to take the stand under oath and be subject to cross-examination. So I respectfully disagree with Mr. O'Mara in terms of the weakness of the case, of the state's case. You know, just for a minor point, the court has before it, one of it is the diagram, the Google of the apartment complex, or townhouses, whatever you call it. The state's contention is what the defendant was doing is he was targeting, profiling what he perceived a criminal, and he was making sure that in his mind, the person he perceived the criminal didn't get away. He was trying to act like a police officer, but he wasn't obviously authorized to act as a police officer. As the call that he called, the non-emergency call, they told him to back off or to get back. He didn't. He runs after this person. He takes him down. And our contention is that he's the aggressor, that the person who actually has self-defense is the victim, Trayvon Martin. I think the case is strong. We have the victim's parents who say that's the voice of the person screaming as the victim. We have the inconsistencies, and there are plenty of them, of the defendant's inconsistent statements to the police. We also have witnesses who observe one individual chasing another, which I would submit is consistent with this defendant chasing the victim in this case. Imagine, if you could, Your Honor, who is more likely to get robbed on a regular basis other than a clerk at the 7-Eleven store? Did that clerk who dealt with Mr. Martin perceive Mr. Martin as a threat because he was wearing a hoodie? No. He treated him as a customer. Mr. Martin bought something and left. And so in retrospect, that is a good photograph that was introduced into evidence in terms of the court considering it, because somehow the implication is that he's a criminal because he's wearing a hoodie or because he's walking back to his house, and apparently he's not walking fast enough or running as Mr. Zimmerman, the defendant, claims he is. What you have here is basically a defendant who perceives himself as the police out there, for whatever reason, and is tired. Maybe in the past there were burglaries and people got away and they all happen to be black individuals, but he perceives this victim as a criminal. He chases him, and at some point, the victim does hit him. But the bottom line is banging. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence, and nobody has testified to that effect. The defendant claims in his statements to the police. I would submit that the injuries are inconsistent with being his head bashed. If the court, and I know the court has already reviewed it, that interview, he describes being bashed, beaten. Those injuries are very inconsistent. He doesn't have any skull fractures. He doesn't have any kind of concussion from that. What happened here on April 20th? And why did that happen? Was it a person who came out of the street and just said out of the blue, oh, I've got some statements, and just misled the court? I would submit lied to the court? No. It was a person who was intimately connected to the defendant. The court has been presented 6 interviews or 6 tape recordings of the defendant's statements when he was talking to his wife and other family members. Quite frankly, we've got like 30 plus of them, in which this defendant spoke to his wife, Shelley Zimmerman, and they used code, they used other words other than $9,000 to make sure that whoever was listening wasn't aware of what was going on. Why was that done? It was done to hide the money so that they could deceive the court, lie to the court. Ms. Zimmerman lied to the court, and this defendant just sat there and allowed that to happen. Because he, quite frankly, was manipulating the whole thing. He was using his wife as a conduit to do this. That's why there was an exchange of money or a transfer of money from PayPal to his account, then later to 2 separate accounts, and then after he got out, back to his account again. I commend Mr. O'Mara in that he found out about it and he brought it to the court's attention. As an officer of the court, I commend him for doing that. They implied to the court, they told the court that they were injured, when in fact they had over $130,000. And so I would request that the court keep this defendant under no bond, because now you just don't have him committing a crime in terms of what the state has had him charged with. You now have him lying to the court through his wife, so that becomes a more egregious set of facts that makes this a more disturbing incident or crime, and therefore I would ask the court to continue to have his bond revoked and keep him under no bond. Thank you.